But it is just wild, the like sheer number of varieties of fruit that exist in the world. I feel like one of the things that was so interesting about working on this issue and also sort of like, looking through all of these pitches was there's so many fruits that I've never heard of or tasted, and it like really does stir your curiosity.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. Cake Zine is an independent literary food magazine co-founded by pastry chef Tanya Bush and me, taste contributing editor Eliza Barbanel. Our newest issue, Forbidden Fruit, explores how fruit fuels temptation, transgression, and fantasy. Today on the show, I invited Tanya into the studio to talk about the editorial process behind this 7th issue and fruit's many cultural meanings. Tanya Bush, this is Taste X Cake Zine again. Thank you for coming back on the podcast.
Here I am again.
It's always such a fun time to get to put our conversations on the record as opposed to the millions of other times we talk during the day. And we're here to talk about the new issue of Cake Zine, Forbidden Fruit.
We are.
I think it is a really interesting kind of new chapter for Cake Zine in some ways. It's the first time that we are doing a theme that is not necessarily a baked good, although I think fruit does fit into the kind of dessert framework that often Cake Zine finds itself in. Do you remember feeling any kind of way about deciding to do fruit as opposed to ice cream or something else?
I don't think I've said this to you before. I do have like a slightly controversial take, which is that fruit is not dessert to me. Like, it doesn't require the kind of preparation most of our previous topics have required. There's no, like ovens or tablespoons. Like, you don't need to be a baker or like a patron of bakeries to eat fruit. And so it feels to me like fruit is like democratic and something that like people have so many memories around, but it's not dessert on its own.
Huh.
How do you feel?
I mean, so I was raised in a home where my parents would say we're going to have dessert, and sometimes it would just be cut fruit. So this might be my latent brainwashing. I think I have certainly been in homes or restaurants where they will do like a beautiful cut fruit plate for dessert, which is something that we talk about in the issue with Gary Nathan's piece.
Yeah.
And I do think that feels like dessert because there is similar preparation and care that goes into it. But I do think if you told the average person, come over for dessert and it was just fruit, maybe that would seem like kind of a misstep.
I'd be mad. Like, whip up some cream for me or something. I agree that like a beautiful plate of cut fruit in a restaurant setting is dessert, but like a handful of blueberries to me is just not going to satiate my sweet tooth.
No, you have to work for it, I think, if you're going to do just cut fruit as a dessert. I will say this issue, we do have recipes that are using fruit in a different kind of dessert, so it does still bring itself into that territory. But I guess maybe to reframe this a little bit, I want to talk about the forbidden element of the theme. So Forbidden Fruit is our 7th issue. It's exploring how fruit fuels temptation and transgression, and obviously it's tied to this biblical story in some kind of way, although we certainly go far past that. And I'm curious, like, why the forbidden element was of interest to you and kind of like the title that we had landed on.
Well, I think like originally we sort of thought of this as our like biblical year, and forbidden fruit is, inextricably linked to this notion of the tree of knowledge and Adam and Eve's apple. But, I think we have, as we always do, these sort of like broad interpretations of forbidden in the context of the magazine. Like, I think about like stealing fruit and mangoes, and then I think about like contraband. We always have these sort of things that are like, fruit adjacent, but maybe not fruit embodied. So I think of like the mango jewel vape or Java, which is like an energy drink in the Nairobi night scene, and, these sort of like illicit substances that are like, not necessarily thought of as like fruit in the same way, but are like adjacent to the fruit category.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is just kind of the nature of fruit itself kind of ties into this idea, maybe not only just forbidden, but just kind of fleeting or transient. I think that like most people live somewhere where there is not the same fruit available all year round. Certainly we can go to the grocery store and buy strawberries wherever because they're being grown all around the world. But to really crave a summer peach in the middle of winter, like that fruit is kind of forbidden in some way because it's out of reach and this thing that you're kind of fantasizing about. And I think it's interesting to have a theme that can talk about something that is so fleeting. And there are certain fruits that, you can only get in certain parts of the world. You can't always be able to try and kind of have that fantasy element.
Totally. Yeah, and I feel like when things are like available less often, they become more coveted, Like I think of like hype pastries or like, I don't know, like limited edition collabs or status items. And like, that makes me think of like rhubarb, for example. Like fruit is so, seasonal and it's like a signifier of change. And so like, when I'm baking at the restaurant in the winter, all we have is like apples or maybe like some pears. And when rhubarb hits in the spring, it's like this true luxury and relief, and it feels like, okay, like time is moving on and we finally have access to this thing that we're all like hungry for. It's spring, it's ushering us into a new season. So I think that like seasonality is a really big part of the issue as well.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. And I have to say, like, no shade to rhubarb, but I don't think people would like rhubarb nearly as much if it wasn't basically the first new spring piece of produce available.
But it's so pretty.
Yeah, but you can't really eat it raw. It's not very juicy. I am a rhubarb fiend in March, April, May, whenever it first becomes available. But last week I was at the farmer's market on the West Coast and my mom goes, "Oh, rhubarb, do you want some?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. Like, where are the nectarines?"
You're like, out of season, no thank you.
Right. I mean, clearly it is still growing, but it's not that girl anymore because there's other fruits that I would say are better that are available right now instead.
What is your like peak summer fruit experience like?
I'm so glad you asked. I think there is a trope in food media that I try not to fall into, but I think I have to, which is the really juicy peach that you eat standing over the sink, or sometimes I eat a peach in the shower.
What? Excuse me?
It's like, okay, it's really hot. You have a beautiful peach.
Not hygienic.
What do you mean? I'm washing it off.
Oh my God.
Maybe like I shouldn't tell people this. Maybe this is too freaky. But I think it's
why in the shower?
Okay, when you have a peach that's so outrageously juicy that you know that it's going to just get everywhere, and you come home from the beach and you're kind of sweaty and hot, and you take this peach and then you stand in the cold shower and you eat the peach. And then you put the pit to the side and then you wash yourself.
I have personally never experienced this, but maybe I should try it before August ends.
I do think it is just such an audacious thing to indulge in. And I think what I like about summer fruit is it is a little messy and too much, and you have to eat it before it goes bad. Like an apple is very sensible for fall. It can last in the fridge for months. But summer fruit, you have to really kind of commit to.
That's very true. I recently had a wild watermelon experience. I was visiting my friend Eliana upstate, and she like sliced a watermelon in half and then drizzled it with olive oil and a little bit of balsamic, and then just like crumbled some feta on top, and we went in with spoons. And it was a wild, like outrageously decadent, beautiful fruit experience. Like I don't think I've had like a salad assembled in the fruit itself before, essentially. And to me, I was like, okay, this is summer. This is summer embodied.
I do like that. Do you redo the toppings when you get further into the melon?
No, because it soaks into the rest of the melon. So like the balsamic is sort of like worming its way into the bottom, and you like as you keep sort of like scooping it with your spoon, it like becomes seasoned entirely.
Look, I love a peach shower. I'm down for a spoon melon. I'm transfixed by this. What was it, a red or a yellow watermelon?
It was a red watermelon. And how do you feel about swallowing the seeds?
It depends on if they're like the big black ones or the little white ones.
Okay. This one had the big black ones, so I was like spitting them and like having a lot of fun doing that. I felt like I was back in my inner childhood. But I also was like, I think someone somewhere along the way said to me like a watermelon will grow in your stomach if you...
My mom said that to me, and this makes me wish that we had done a story in the issue about a watermelon seed growing in somebody's stomach or a cherry pit or something, because that is such a forbidden fruit thing.
That is such a forbidden fruit thing. That's honestly, I don't even think we have a watermelon story, do we?
We don't. I think it was really difficult for us to set the lineup for this issue more than any other issue in the past, partially because we received so many pitches. We received over 600 pitches for this issue, which is more than we've received for anything else. And also because we not only were thinking about diversity in terms of the types of stories that were in it and the contributors, but also what fruit was represented. And we received certain fruits that were like very overrepresented in the pitches and others that didn't really make it in at all. I know we received some watermelon pitches, but I would say that mango is probably the most represented fruit.
Yeah, I feel like we got hundreds of mango pitches, which I feel like, I don't know, it's like a particularly like delicious fruit to me. And a lot of people have sort of like childhood associations with it. There's also a lot of apples, I think, which like brings us back to the old an apple a day keeps the doctor away adage, or sort of like the Americanness of, apple pie. But yeah, there were certain fruits that like I think were more popular than others.
Yeah, the apple of it all was really interesting to me. One of my favorite pieces in the issue, although they all are so great, is Rafaela Bacelli's piece, Mrs. American Pie. She's a Brazilian writer who is writing about moving to New York, falling in love with an American, and also learning to fall in love with apples as a result of this, and the kind of sadness of being a Brazilian who grew up in this tropical paradise with all of these incredible fruits and then having to kind of settle for apples, which I relate to because I grew up on the West Coast where we have citrus and strawberries basically year round. And then when I started moving further east for college, I realized that people were kind of obsessed with apples and all these different varietals. And I had to kind of reframe my expectations for fall fruit and kind of like learn to fall in love with apples.
How do you get through the like fallow winter with just apples? Do you do anything fun to them?
Well, I do. Apples are like my bridge fruit, I would say. Like I feel like late summer we still have stone fruit, other things. Then it's apples. Then in the winter, I'm just buying citrus from Florida or California. And that's really, I think, the vitamin C that I need. But I do love an apple with peanut butter. I think that is kind of perfect.
100%. I love a like apple sliced with a little bit of cinnamon on top and a little bit of honey. That's my favorite.
What's your go-to apple varietal?
I think like a Granny Smith, honestly, which feels kind of like a lame answer, but I do love like something really like tart and hard and crisp. And I also love it with peanut butter. And I feel like it's kind of the perfect foil in terms of like textural interplay. You have like the sort of like soft, decadent richness of the peanut butter. And then the apple itself is so like crisp and hard and like never mealy. And so that's my perfect apple, I think.
Yeah, I like a green apple also. There's a kind of apple called mutsu that I think common at the farmers markets here in New York that I don't really know what makes it different from a Granny Smith, except for I find them to be a little bit smaller. So I think it's a good size apple to eat like in the hand. You know?
A Granny Smith can be monstrous. A terrifying apple.
It's a lot to embark on. And I do appreciate, I think, cutting fruit, as we've said before, can be such a love language, and there's certainly some fruits that you need to cut to eat. But I think my ideal apple can be just kind of crunched on in the hand.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that's also why I sort of like lunge for berries in the summer, is that I can just like, if I'm making like a jam or a compote at the restaurant or something, I can just like toss a fistful into my mouth and like there's no preparation involved whatsoever.
Well, I think that's what makes donut peaches such an elite summer fruit, is that they're easier to eat in the hand as opposed to a kind of bigger peach.
They're too sweet to me.
They are a little sweet. I think I've seen some farms that have the yellow kind and not just the white kind, and I prefer those because I think they have a little bit more of that kind of tangy spectrum of flavor.
Okay, you need to connect me with your rare fruit dealer. Eliza's got the connect, folks.
I have been like developing a friendship with a man who sells hard to find fruits close to the Fort Greene Farmers Market. He is named Jeffrey, and he sells pawpaw, I think, are one of his main fruits, which is something I've actually never had before, but I think is coming into season, I think, late summer. It's kind of similar to a custard apple, and it's an indigenous fruit in the Midwest United States. I can't remember what book, but I remember being a kid and reading a book that had pawpaw in it and really kind of falling in love with it in that kind of way. Have you tried this before?
No, I've never had them, but our friend Bree loves them. I feel like they grew up with them in Ohio.
They're from Ohio.
Yeah. But it is just wild, the like sheer number of varieties of fruit that exist in the world. I feel like one of the things that was so interesting about working on this issue and also sort of like, looking through all of these pitches was, there's so many fruits that I've never heard of or tasted, and it like really does stir your curiosity.
Yeah, I remember there was a pitch about a Javanese snake fruit that I was really interested in trying. I've been on the like Miami fruit website. Do you know this? orchard.
No.
They are a tropical fruit grower in Florida, and they sell truly so many fruits that I've never heard of or tried before. And Hamel Whaley recently posted about this Ecuadorian fruit that he had bought from them. And so I was kind of going down this rabbit hole and trying to justify how much money I could spend on tropical fruit. But I think because we have so much good seasonal local fruit right now, I'm going to try to wait until winter before I start buying they have like a single durian for $200. Like they have status fruit there.
Status fruit. I feel like the status fruit of the summer is the Zerbanati melon.
Yeah, that's what
What's
New York
your
Mag
thought?
says.
That's what New York Mag said.
I do like them. I just think, to me, watermelon is the best melon.
Really?
I'm not as interested in kind of cantaloupe or honeydew or something like that.
We talk about health a lot on the show. You know, protein maxing is all the rage. We're on the NA beer train, of course. And probiotic sodas, some call those millennial Metamucil. But I want to talk about skin health for a second. Everybody should be thinking about skin health. It's important, and I look to OneSkin, the world's first skin longevity company, for a little help. Now, I've used OneSkin's OS1 hydrating sunscreen for walking around New York City in the blazing sun. I wish I had OneSkin on a recent 7 Pizzeria pizza crawl. Now, it wasn't just the roof of my mouth that got burned that day. And for the record, FNF and Upside are my NYC slice picks. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin with 15% off using promo code TASTEPOD at oneskin.co. That's 15% off using code TASTEPOD. I love Maine lobster for its versatility in the kitchen and its iconic flavor, the sweetest lobster on earth. Prepared in pasta, served chilled in a salad, and of course in a lobster roll. Maine's lobster fishery is among the most sustainable in the world, with every lobster harvested by hand, one trap at a time, from independently owned and operated day boats. Maine lobster can be purchased year-round, fresh or frozen, raw or pre-cooked, shell on or shell off, and with ready-to-eat and ready-to-use options. Visit lobsterfrommaine.com for details.
Wait, okay, we need to talk about this issue some more, because we could just chat loosely about fruit forever. But I want to talk about some of the interpretations of forbidden that we have landed on in this issue, because I think there's a really nice span of them. I don't know if you have like a favorite interpretation of forbidden in the issue, or maybe one that comes to mind as being kind of unconventional.
Favorite is difficult, but I think like maybe one that I did not have on my bingo card was like a cross-species love piece. Eliza is groaning. About basically a man who's sort of like sick of capitalism, sick of his sort of like mundane home life, and he falls in love with this giant golden crowned flying fox, which is a bat that's also like a frugivore. And he he writes this sort of like ode to her, and then by the end of the piece you sort of realize that he's like going to go like abscond in the night and live in the woods with her and like figure out how to, sleep upside down and, make love with bat.
Okay, the last part is not. The last part is maybe an undertone to the piece.
It's an undertone, guys. It's very PG.
I do love that. I think as a kid, I grew up reading this book called Stella Luna, which is a children's story about a fruit bat. And so I think I have a soft place in my heart for fruit bats. And when we received this pitch about writing an ode to the largest fruit bat in the world, it just felt like such a sweet and kind of funny take on it. I did really enjoy that. And the frugivore of it all, which is someone who eats fruit, reminds me of another piece that I was not expecting that I really enjoy, which is by Amina Khan about fruitarians. So people who apparently subsist on only fruit, which is a kind of like ideology about people who believe that that is the best way for humans to survive. Steve Jobs famously was a fruitarian, and Amina is writing about a vlogger from an earlier era of YouTube called Freely the Banana Girl, who apparently subsists on eating 30 bananas a day. And this kind of larger moment in a kind of earlier era of YouTube vlogging and kind of pseudo health practices that herself and other people kind of fell into.
Yeah, I mean, we like descend with her into this sort of like cult of people who are like, sort of like laundering their eating disorders as like a lifestyle that everyone else should like subscribe to essentially. But it's wild. It's a very particular like era in the like 2010s influencer world.
Yeah, and Freely the Banana Girl's partner, who makes a lot of appearances in the blog, his name is Durian Ryder, which I think is such a funny
Iconic
at for it. I think we also have a lot of kinds of questioning about like illicit substances. You mentioned Java before, which is kind of a drink made from khat in Nairobi, which was kind of being used by truck drivers as a stimulant, but has become popular with the younger generation in the kind of nightlife rave scene by making these juice like flavored drinks, which I think is interesting. But we also have a nicotine story, which I think is one of your pet favorites in the issue.
I do love this story. Hate to admit that I was once a former Juul imbiber, but it's basically about like a contraband mango Juul pods sort of search. And this writer is talking about sort of like scoring them through the dark web and like going to like increasingly deranged lengths to, stockpile essentially mango Juul pods when they become banned by the FDA.
The FDA banned fruit-flavored vapes here in the U.S. kind of similarly in the way that in previous decades, the cigarette companies were being told that they couldn't do flavored cigarettes because they were being marketed towards children. So I liked thinking about like the fruit as the tempting vehicle by which the nicotine was being administered and how this guy was like, I can't switch to mint. I can't.
No cucumber for me.
Do cucumber. I must buy mango Juul pods off the dark web from a grandma in Russia to get them.
He quit though, folks.
He did quit, not to spoil the piece.
Not to spoil the piece. But you're right, there are like a lot of sort of illicit substances happening in the context of the magazine. I also think of Chris Crowley's story, which is called Orange Crushed. And it's about sort of growing up and coming to realize that his father was drinking orange soda spiked with vodka as he was driving him and his brother around. And it's this like really interesting and like unsentimental meditation, I think, on like, something that was like entirely out of reach that shaped his childhood in a certain way, but is also sort of, I think, at the same time, like railing against this notion of like nostalgia around food writing. And he's not really saying like, oh, this was like a formative trauma of mine. He's sort of saying this is like a part of my identity and family and something that happened to me. But that doesn't mean that I've like entirely lost my taste for orange soda or that it has like, fundamentally like shaped the way that I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the stories we've been talking about also show how we've been able to not only talk about fruit on its own or fruit in a dessert, but how drinks or vapes or things that still have this kind of juicy essence fall into the issue. We do have some stories that are talking about a kind of like forbiddenness in a more legal or kind of like governmental way. Mm-hmm. There are a couple stories that are talking about fruits like the tonka bean or Mexican guava, which were being regulated by the FDA as being forbidden in the United States. I know that tonka bean is kind of a pet ingredient for you, actually.
I do love a tonka bean. I read a small story about it a couple years ago, and I'm just obsessed with its sort of spicy almondy vanilla scent. And I actually didn't know. I mean, this makes a lot of sense in retrospect, but there's a tonka fruit, and that is the seed of the fruit, which Rose Wild, who's the author of a gooey tonka bean butter cake recipe in the issue, grew up eating in Ecuador. But I don't know. I think it's akin to vanilla, but in so many ways far superior, and was banned, and I think actually remains banned contemporarily. My sense is because of racism and also probably because of some nefarious vanilla lobby or something, because the tonka bean is so much cheaper than a vanilla bean, and it stretches so far. You can use one bean to flavor 30 plates of dessert, and it has just such a beautiful and unique scent, and it's often used in perfume. So I was really excited to have Rose sort of delve into that history.
Yeah, I will say the ostensible reason for which it's banned is that it has a high level of a poisonous compound in it, but it actually is no different than cinnamon, I believe. And you would have to consume many beans for it to somehow have an adverse effect. So it seems more that it's kind of from a regulatory side, similar with the Mexican guava, which we have a guava nicotole recipe from Yara Herrera in the issue, who's the chef at Hellbender here in New York. And Mexican guava was banned in the United States for a long time because of associations with a fruit fly. And I think people were worried that if you brought the fruits into the country, the fruit fly could have adverse effects on agriculture here. But over time, that was proven to not really be a concern. And now this fruit is actually available again.
Yeah, I've actually never had a guava, like a fresh guava. Have you?
Yeah, all the time.
Really?
Really?
I haven't. I know. I've had guava paste, but I've never like broken into a guava.
Wow. I feel like I've failed you a little bit. I should have
Yeah,
picked one up.
you're the one who's supposed to bring me the fruit.
I know. I brought you the weird smoothie instead.
So true.
Probably because I grew up in California, I would say they're very common, this kind of pink, smaller guava that she's talking about. But also the Taiwanese, like Asian guava, which almost looks like a chayote squash, and they sell down on Canal Street or in Asian supermarkets, has a really nice flavor as well. I think that guava, you kind of eat it when it's more firm, and the Mexican guava you eat when it's a little bit softer. But I do really enjoy fresh guava.
Okay, let's go after this.
Yeah, we have to. I'm wondering if you could maybe speak to one or two more of the recipes we have in this issue. We've talked about two, but I think there's so many good ones.
Yeah. I mean, I love them all. I think another fruit that I have regretfully not tried is a durian. I know, I'm like... Eliza is aghast. I've never had a durian, but Mei Liao made this beautiful like snow skin mooncakes recipe that includes sort of like a creamy, cheesy like durian filling that she sort of calls her like gateway durian dessert. And she writes a little bit about the history of the durian as this like status fruit and like how they're going for like, $600. But that you're also not allowed to carry them on public transport in places like Singapore because they have such a uniquely perhaps like sulfurous odor, which I've never smelled before.
Okay, actually, we should just go to Canal Street after this because they sell them like on the street there as well. I was in Thailand in the beginning of the year, and I have a little photo series on my phone of all of the no durian signs that they have in places like hotels or public transportation. Because marijuana is legal there, they'll have signs that say no cannabis, no durian, because they both are so pungent. But I think that is a really fun recipe to have in the issue because it's talking about this fruit that is polarizing in two kinds of ways, right? It's super coveted and prized, but also on the nose, it can be a bit much, especially in a public space.
Yeah, I'm very excited to eat the dessert.
Yeah, I think the mooncake is a nice kind of interpretation of certainly when you're pairing a durian with cream cheese, as she does in this recipe, or something. Ice cream is very common. It kind of mellows out a little bit of that sulfuric bite.
Mm-hmm.
You know how papaya can sometimes have that kind of...
Yes.
Yeah, I don't.
You don't even need to say it.
I don't want to say the word like a negative association here, but papaya can sometimes be a little bit like barnyardy as well. I think it's kind of similar to that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm curious, as a baker, how you feel about baking with fruit, like somehow transforming it versus just eating it straight up. I feel like I always buy things like peaches that I have aspirations of making compote or a crumble or something, but then I just don't have the self-control and I just eat them. Do you kind of distinguish between things that you want to transform versus just eat straight up?
That's a good question. I think like there are certain fruits that I'm more likely to like bake or roast or caramelize. Like I think of like a banana. Like I'm never lunging for a banana. Like I don't really want to eat it plain. Like it's sort of a last ditch snack for me if I must. But I think like, bruleed or caramelized or like, steeped into a custard is something that's like very delicious. And, I do like bake a lot with fruits at Little Egg. We are like a seasonally oriented restaurant. And so, this summer feels like abundance embodied. But I think that, yeah, like jams are something that I tend to make a lot. We do a lot of like jams and compotes. We have like a seasonal fruit pie that constantly rotates. And so to me, it's very exciting to get to go to the market and be like, the blackberries look really good this week. Like, let's like cook them down low and slow, like a whisper of sugar, like a hint of lemon juice. And then like, you're trying to capture the beauty and essence of the fruit in its peak form while also making it, appropriate for a pie context. So that always feels good to me.
I love the phrase, a whisper of sugar. I think Apricots are a fruit that is almost always better baked than eaten plain. I grew up with an apricot tree, and so I have a lot of childhood memories of eating them plain, but I think most of the time when you have one, they're just not as good as you want them to
I feel
be.
like they're often mealy.
Yes, and the flavor isn't as concentrated, but when they are, baked into a pie or even like a dried apricot, I think they're so much better.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's like interesting to think about like the forms that are appropriate for each fruit. Like I think about like, fruit ice creams, right? I think it's like often a berry flavor gets lost because they're like, they can't hold up to like the sort of blank expanse of the fatty dairy, whereas like passion fruit, for example, like I often make like a custard with, right? And I feel like has such a already sort of sharp and tangy and acidic flavor to it that it's going to be able to meld very beautifully in dairy. So I often do like a curd with it or, a custard. But, I think like to me, I'm often trying to work with fruit that is, in season as much as possible. And we do source like berries, that are like frozen at their peak, and then we'll use them a little bit throughout the winter. But it's pretty often just sort of what's available at the market.
Yeah, I think this idea of preservation of fruit is something that we touch on a bit, but if we had space to do a double issue, would have loved to done more there, because I think if you look at the history of dried fruit or syrups or jams, like it's not just because they're delicious in that context, but because you're preserving that fruit to last you through the winter, because you can't necessarily go to the grocery store and buy some berries from Costa Rica.
Yeah, totally. It reminds me of the mock apple pie piece that Camilla Wynn developed a recipe for in Humble Pie, which is sort of like trying to emulate the flavors of a classic sort of like crumbly caramel apple pie, but sans fruit because it's not always readily available.
Yeah, it was a Depression-era recipe that she kind of revitalized for our third issue, and she, I believe, soaks Ritz crackers in apple cider, apple
like
vinegar.
I think she makes like a syrup. Yeah.
I had a bite of it, and I really, if you had not told me, I would have thought it was apple. It was incredibly successful.
I love that.
I always am interested in how our view on the subject of the issue changes after working on it. And I think fruit is no exception. And when I was kind of preparing to come here, I was thinking a lot about just the enduring significance and myth and cultural context that fruit has. Like, I think every culture around the world has fruits that are embedded in their origin story, like the reasons for the world. We have a recipe in the issue from Mina Stone that's a pomegranate icebox cake that's tied to the Greek myth of Persephone being held into the underworld after eating pomegranate seeds, and that myth is kind of explaining why the seasons come to pass. And I think there's something that makes me feel really kind of tender or sweet towards humanity, that these fruits that are such a kind of gift to us from nature are not really taken lightly, that they kind of are enshrined in cultural meaning in these ways.
Totally. And I love that at the end of that recipe, she talks about how in Greece, it's become sort of like a ritual and tradition to like smash a pomegranate on New Year's Day, right? So it's sort of like consecrating, like, or ushering you into a new year, and like how fruit is sort of like this beautiful symbol and way to do that.
Yeah, and that reminds me of in Spain, there's the tradition on New Year's to eat like 12 grapes at midnight. Have you done that before?
No.
I feel like I've been
Why
to a couple.
12?
I think for the 12 months of the year, but it's very overwhelming because you're supposed to eat them like before the bell stops tolling. So you are just kind of like shoving grapes into your mouth as soon as the ball drops, but it's a fun thing to do.
It sounds like a liability.
Yeah, you have to chew very thoroughly. Maybe we could do that and also smash a pomegranate on the ground this year.
I love that. We should. Yeah, but I do think you're totally right that like fruit is like this symbol in a way that maybe I hadn't entirely contended with before like the issue began. And it makes me think also of Osama Shahzad's piece about how sour fruits are forbidden for boys. In growing up in Karachi, there was sort of like this gender myth that men around him were sort of propagating, that it would, if you consume too much sour fruit, it will lead you to grow boobs, essentially. You'll have a hearty rack if you have like too many chili millies.
I wish I could say that was true, honestly, but it is really sweet and funny for him to be kind of reminiscing on this era in his life in which he loved so much to eat tamarind and these chili milli candies and all of these things, but that he was being told by the men in his life that it would have adverse effects on him, and then kind of being an adult contending with like, why was that being told to me? Why do I know other people who had that experience? Like, why would this kind of myth be in place? And maybe it's like their version of the watermelon will grow in your stomach if you swallow the seed.
Totally.
Or maybe he was just eating way too much sour things, and they were like, we got to rein this guy in.
They were like, this is too much, folks.
His stomach is going to be upset.
So funny.
Are there any other interpretations of forbidden that you want to tease out? I think we've hit on a good amount.
Yeah. I mean, I think like one of the pieces that I really love in the issue is sort of about labor. And like this writer, Kay, writes about nannying for like a wealthy NYC family and for like over 6 years, and the ways that like domestic labor is sort of like a tease into forbidden worlds. And they travel to Corsica with this family and, you know, suddenly have access to like these chestnuts and these strawberries that are like the sweetest that they've ever tasted. And it was really interesting to think about how like food specifically plays a central role in this fantasy, and their employer sort of asked them to like smuggle chestnuts to make jam in New York, and how, yeah, like fantasy and fruit are sort of colliding in terms of like class and identity.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think we are in a moment where they have the Japanese strawberries that are kind of grown in hydroponic ways, and Harry's berries, like the cult status fruits, even the Zerbinati melons that you mentioned before. I think like that really is a big thing in food culture right now.
Yeah, 100%.
And another labor story that I really love in this issue is a kind of profile of this young man named Bilal who works in a fruteria in Barcelona. And a lot of the staff in these fruterias are undocumented workers, often from Pakistan, where he's from, or other places in that region. And I just like want to be Bilal's friend so much after reading this story. He seems like such a interesting and cool and like ultimately optimistic guy who's just trying to do his job until he can get immigration papers and send money back to his family. And you know, every night he like stays up for hours making like the one dish that he knows how to make before he goes to bed. And
I want that chicken.
I want to eat this chicken, and I want to like give him a hug, kind of. Like, I feel like this kind of place that he's in, like obviously so many people around the world are in situations where they are undocumented and also part of the economic livelihood of a community. And he's selling fruit to these people every day and just kind of, you know, watching YouTube, like trying to get by. But I love the story because it wasn't really a phenomenon that I knew about before. And I left it really feeling like at least I knew about this one person.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, I think that for the sake of fruit time, we should move into some rapid fire at the end. But before we do that, I just want to mention a couple launch things that we're doing that we're excited about. Should we talk about our party?
We're having a party.
We're having a party again. It's going to be
We're
at
addicted to throwing
Honey's.
parties.
Well, it's for the business.
For the business, yeah.
We're doing a launch party with a couple readings at Honey's in Brooklyn on September 18th. Honey's is the bar that we did our very first launch party for Cake Zine, and I think it has a really special place in our hearts. So I'm really excited to come back, and we have some kind of fun fruit desserts in store.
We do. Should we tease them? Amanda Perdomo, who's like one of the most incredible pastry chefs that I know, is making like a massive slab fruit pie that we're going to like hopefully distribute in an organized fashion. But I'm just very excited to eat her pie.
Yeah.
And I'm also hoping that the power doesn't go out at Honey's.
Okay, the power did go out last time. But
That's
that was
like the origin story of Cake Zine. It's like our first party. About an hour before we were supposed to kick off, the power on the entire block goes out. And Eliza like heroically is like calling everyone she knows, trying to figure out a generator. She's like, we have hundreds of people coming. What are we going to do? And then the power came back on.
But I did find
She did.
literally the last generator
In all of New York.
in Queens. When I showed up, the guys were like, lady, I don't know who you know to call this for you, which is my friend who throws raves. So he like always knows where the generators are. And as soon as we brought it back, the power came back on. And then we had to figure out where to store the generator because the store had already closed.
Right. Oh my
And
God.
that's the beauty of live events. The other dessert that I'm really excited about at our party is when I was in Taipei, I met up with this cake baker who I have been obsessed with her cakes online for years. Her handle is Fu Cakes and her name is Yuning, and she is going to be in town. And so she's going to do a special fruit cake for us as well. And we also have some fun plans that I think maybe are not quite further enough along to share, but we'll be sharing them on our social media when it happens.
Yeah. Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Okay, ready for the wrap?
Recently in the show, we took a deep dive into the amazing world of Dijon mustard with help from our friends at Mai. Mai brings over 270 years of French craftsmanship to every jar of premium Dijon mustard. Since 1747, Mai has been perfecting the art of flavor, transforming everything from simple sandwiches to gourmet meals. Look for the "Oh my, it's a great talk about Dijon mustard" episode in the This Is Taste podcast feed. Embark on a gastronomic tour through Europe's finest flavors with European Tasty Tales, a podcast series that explores interesting stories behind traditions, taste, and iconic European Union products such as Italian Pecorino Romano, Croatian extra virgin olive oil, and Irish whiskey. Each episode celebrates the stories, culture, and people behind these extraordinary culinary experiences. Start your tasty adventure today by listening to European Tasty Tales on Spotify.
Rapid fire.
I'm ready.
Okay, your top 3 favorite fruits.
Cherries, passion fruit, and you're not going to like this, but rhubarb.
Wow.
Just because of what it symbolizes.
I know, I'm very here for that. I do like rhubarb. I would say nectarines, cherries, and maybe like grapefruit or pomelo, like some kind of winter citrus, because I think right now I'm really focused on stone fruit, but the winter citrus really does kind of save me during a dark point in the year.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you do like a little sprinkle of sugar on top or just raw dog?
I like to do like sumac or like tahini or like something that's like a little bit kind of spicy, tangy. And then if it needs sugar, I'll do a little bit of sugar. But I think I just really want like the vitamin C, you know?
Totally. You're deprived.
Okay, your favorite jam flavor?
Ooh. I'm going to keep it classic and go raspberry. Like, I just do think it's the superior jam. I've made many jams in my life, and I just think that, honestly, like, the Bon Maman raspberry jam is so good. Like, sometimes I will just, like, get a little bit of that jam and I'll whisk it up with a little bit of like citric acid for like extra sort of like kick, and then maybe a little bit of extra salt. And to me, it's just so like tangy and punchy and delicious. And like raspberry has such a sort of like singular flavor to me that, you know, often I feel that like other berries or fruit can maybe get a little bit more muddled. So raspberry it is.
I like that idea of adding the citric acid.
Oh, it's such a nice way to like not add any additional moisture, but to have that sort of like zingy end. And it's really delicious. I mean, you could add a little bit of lemon juice too, but I like just like a pinch of citric acid, maybe a little bit of salt, whisk it up.
I would also say the Bon Maman raspberry flavor is what I buy. But I think apricot jam is fun on like a good piece of buttered brioche or something.
Agreed.
Okay, your favorite fruit-flavored candy?
You know I'm a chocolate girl through and through. Okay, I think, can this even be considered fruit adjacent? I do think that the like cherry Tootsie Pop is my candy of choice. Like,
Yeah.
I often bring like a Tootsie Pop into a movie theater. That's like my ideal movie snack.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, but because it lasts for a long time. If the movie's boring, you're like, how many licks does it take?
I would say, I don't know if this counts as fruit because I only can say it by the color, but the pink Starburst, which is maybe
Is it strawberry?
That's what I would probably guess.
Okay,
But
interesting.
I think if you're calling something by the color instead of the fruit, then maybe it doesn't count.
It
But
tells you a lot.
this is my podcast, so
So fair.
that or the green apple Jolly Rancher.
How do you feel about Sour Patch Kids?
I do like them, but I think if I'm gonna have a fruit flavored candy, for some reason I gravitate more towards like a sucky kind of thing as opposed to like a chewy thing.
I feel like Sour Patch Kids really like fell out of favor. I remember them being like such a
They were really
source of
cool.
like delight and like intrigue when I was younger. And now I'm just like, that's not really what people are lunging for.
Well, Bon Bon is super popular and they're doing gummy candies. And I did have a really good grapefruit flavor gummy candy from Bon Bon that tasted exactly like grapefruit. So
Oh, really?
That was cool.
Okay, I love that.
Okay, this is so not a rapid fire.
Sorry.
A fruit you think is better cooked?
Banana.
Apricot. And finally, a hard to find fruit that you wish you could try.
The Tonka. I really want to have a Tonka fruit. Rose like talks about how it's sort of akin to a mango, which I find really interesting.
That's
And I'm
interesting.
curious like if the sort of like flavor of the seed is infused at all in the like flesh of the fruit itself, or if it's has an entirely different flavor.
Yeah. Well, you know that I've been on a search to find good wax apples in the U.S., but recently I went to the wine bar Lai Rai in Chinatown, and they were doing a cashew fruit ice cream, which I had, and now I would very much like to try a actual cashew fruit.
Are they in the shape of a cashew?
No, the cashew nut is kind of like descending off of like the bottom of it. It's kind of like a bell, and then it has this little nut beneath it.
Oh, so sweet.
I know it does seem really cute, but I think like that's one of my favorite things about working on this issue is similar to the wide variety of cookies or pies that exist in the world. Like there's just such this tapestry of fruit that humans have maybe intervened and nudged along, but really like nature created on its own. And I have like a lifelong pursuit now to try all of it.
That's beautiful.
I guess we can end it there. Thank you so much for listening. And Tanya, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
If you want to learn more about forbidden fruit and buy a copy, you can head to cakezine.com or a stockist near you. This is Taste is hosted and produced by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Abarbanel. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumbert and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell, logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.